There's a managerial candidate we haven't yet discussed for the Atlanta Braves, Danny Lehmann of the Los Angeles Dodgers. And from folks I've talked to, he just might be one of the favorites. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Tuesday, October 21st, your source for news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on X Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and Instagram as well. And you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. We're proudly part of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. The World Series matchup is set, and I hate to break it to you, the Los Angeles Dodgers are favored to win their second consecutive World Series. We'll talk more about the World Series a little bit later this week, but in the meantime, if you're ready to get in on the action, go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app today to get started. I want to talk about a potential breakout prospect for 2026. Every year, it feels like there's somebody who kind of shoots through the farm system and surprises us a little bit. But before we do that, we got to talk about a managerial candidate that I've mentioned in passing, but haven't really talked about in depth. And that's Danny Lehmann of the Los Angeles Dodgers. He was one of the names that Mark Bowman of MLB.com mentioned in his story naming candidates. I don't remember off the top of my head if David O'Brien of The Athletic also mentioned him or not, but he's considered to be, I guess, somewhat of a rising star in baseball. One of those guys that he has been in LA his entire post-retirement as a player and has consistently continued to move up and move up and move up. So let's talk about him. Let's talk about who he is, who he was as a player, who he is as a coach, what we do know about him, what we don't know, any sort of ties to Atlanta. And by the way, if you want all of our content on the managerial searches, bravestoday.com, there's a section that's called Atlanta's Next Manager. And then here on YouTube, I'll make a playlist of specifically the managerial related shows if you want to go back and check stuff. But what you need to know about Danny Lehmann. Stop me if you've heard this before. He was a catcher before he got into coaching. Lehmann was an 8th round pick by the Minnesota Twins in 2007 out of Rice. And he was one of those guys. I talked about George Lombard from the perspective of he was not that good, and so he understands how hard Major League Baseball is, right? Danny Lehmann is that times 2. Okay, again, drafted in 2007 in the 8th round. Makes it to AAA by 2010. So his third full season, he makes it to AAA. 2011, AA and AAA. 2012, AA and AAA. 2013, AA and AAA. He never debuts in the majors. After 2013, he goes to independent ball for a year to Sugar Land in the Atlantic League. And then he decides to hang him up. And kind of around the same time, and let's back up a little bit. He wasn't, even in the minors, he wasn't that accomplished. Over 7 seasons, 365 games, 1,272 plate appearances. He had a batting average of .229 with a .317 on base and a .301 slug. 8 homers, 4 triples, 47 doubles in his career. So 252 hits, but 59 of them were for extra bases. .301 slug for his career in the minors. And so he kind of hits a crossroads, right? He's 29 years old in 2015, and he decides to re-enroll at Rice and get his degree because he didn't finish his degree. Like, he came out, partway through college to go pro. And the Dodgers call with a job offer. He doesn't become a on-field coach right away, right? He goes to the video room. He's working on scouting. He's working on replays. Like when you see the manager in the dugout pick the phone up, or the bench coach pick the phone up, and they're asking somebody, hey, should we review, like, should we challenge this or not? In LA, you were talking to Danny Lehman. Does that for a couple seasons. And then from there, he moves into an on-field role as the game planning and communication coach. He does that pretty consistently for a couple seasons. There's like one brief stint where he's a special assistant or something. And then in 2022, or after 2022, the then current bench coach, Bob Guerin, shifts over to Major League Field Coordinator. And Lehman takes the bench coach job. And that, I think, is the big deal here. Because you have to remember, like in 2023, there were quite a few former Major League managers on LA's coaching staff. Like at the time, Bob Guerin, who I just mentioned, he had managed the Oakland A's for 4 seasons. Chris Woodward had managed the Rangers for 4 years. Ron Renicky had managed the Brewers for 5 seasons and the Boston Red Sox for a year. And then Dino Ebel, the third base coach, had been a minor league manager for like a decade. But yet, despite all of that experience managing, the guy they made the bench coach was Danny Lehman. And that's a big deal because if your manager gets thrown out or misses a game for whatever reason, your bench coach is in charge. And that tells me kind of a lot, right? About their belief in his ability to run the program if he needed to, and their faith and trust in him. That's a role he still has today. And he's talked about how much work he did with the Dodgers and how intense this whole process has been since he joined their organization. Quote, there's always a learning curve because every year they've given me more responsibility, which I'm super grateful for. And this is a quote of his to the Orange County Register in 2023. The game takes a while for you to understand what you need to be thinking about, how things layer in on top of each other, and how things connect from one series to the next. So understanding the day-to-day of a team and understanding how this series impacts the next series, right? If you overuse the bullpen in this series, you either need some roster moves or some long starts from starters in the next series, right? Dave Roberts said that he has a, quote, crazy bandwidth for information. So when we talk about being analytically inclined, he's another guy kind of like George Lombard, where we don't have any direct evidence of his willingness to use analytics. But you can look at some of those quotes. Like, again, Dave Roberts saying he has a crazy bandwidth for information. They're feeding him information. And the fact of who he worked for, like how Lombard worked for the Dodgers and then the Tigers. Lehman's worked for a very analytically strong organization in the Dodgers. He has to at least be open to using analytics. He wouldn't have lasted this long and continued moving up and moving up and moving up were he not comfortable with analytics, because this organization is very, very big in the analytics. I've seen them pinch hit for Freddie Freeman before. They're probably a little too big into analytics because they've pinch hit for Mookie Betts or for Freddie Freeman before. But like Lombard, he's not a perfect candidate. Like AA is familiar with him. They were there at the same time. Lehman, so AA joined the front office in late 2015 after leaving the Blue Jays. Lehman joined the organization the same year AA did. So they worked in the same organization for 16 and 17 before AA left to go be the GM in Atlanta. So there's some familiarity there. But other than one game, he's never managed. In 2023, Dave Roberts missed a Saturday game against the Padres to watch his son graduate from college. And so Lehman got to be the manager in that game. And I believe LA won. And I want to say he pulled Dustin May from the game early. Like, he didn't let Dustin May go as deep as you normally think he would, but they won the game. And He doesn't have the experience. Kind of similar to what we talked about where George Lombard doesn't have the managerial experience. Same thing here. He doesn't have the managerial experience. But at the same time, he's gotten a really good education. And in that same 2023 Orange County Register piece, he talked a little bit about how his experience isn't traditionally what teams have used for managers, but it's still really good experience. Quote, how managers are picked today is very different than 10, 15, 20 years ago. There was a progression in the past where it was kind of like you manage whatever league in the minors and you progress, or then you become a base coach. It's just very different. I think now it's a little bit more specific in how you want to run your team, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I do think this is a scenario where the staff you put around him matters. And I do think it matters probably a little bit more than it did for George Lombard. Lombard needs a strong staff too. You need a strong staff, period. But Lombard I feel like Lehman probably needs a little bit more of a veteran-laden former manager staff than Lombard did, simply because Lehman's not worked for anybody but the Dodgers. He doesn't necessarily, to my knowledge, have that depth of experience in how other organizations do things. And so being able to have strong former managers around him who have experienced a lot of other organizations and how other teams do things, so everybody can figure out best. Odds are whatever LA's doing is probably the best practice, but we don't know that. I do think both these guys need a strong staff. I do think Lehman's need is probably a little bit higher for a strong staff than Lombard's. The good thing is that the Dodgers being in the playoffs, it won't necessarily be an issue here other than the actual announcement, right? AA made a quote on all of this when he was asked about being able to talk to managers or to coaches who are still in the postseason. Quote, we'd get permissions on coaches and staff and all that, and we work it through off days. You can still touch base and communicate. You can't wait. What if you have a candidate that wins the World Series, then there's the parade and all that? Now you're into November, especially with all these other jobs. Teams will work with you because people don't want to deny others an opportunity. There's only 30 of these jobs in the world. So the fact that LA hasn't played since late last weekend, they don't play again until Friday. The Braves have plenty of time this week to have a first and a second interview with Tommy Lehmann. I don't have any specific news as to whether they've already done it or haven't done it or anything. But again, people that I've talked to have said he is a legitimate candidate. Pay attention to Danny Lehmann. He is a candidate for the job, and maybe more so than we realize. So we definitely need to talk about that, simply because we haven't. In just a minute, let's talk about prospects contributing in 2026. I've got my choice, my end of season choice for next year's breakout prospect, the one that surprises us and gets major league run. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Delete Me. Listen, I am online a lot, whether it's social media, whether it's this show, other podcasts and things that I do. I'm online a lot. And so what I'm trying to do is keep the attention on me, right? I don't talk about my family a lot, my kids, all that kind of stuff, because I'm trying to just maintain a little bit of privacy there. And that's where something like Delete Me comes in. If something does get out, and I don't want it to be out there, Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. So, take control of your data, keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me, now at a special discount for listeners of Braves Today. Get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/HIT and use promo code HIT at checkout. The only way to get 20% off, joindeleteme.com/HIT, promo code HIT at checkout. Again, joindeleteme.com/HIT, promo code HIT. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby. Let's talk a little bit about the prospect depth heading into 2026. Because I think one of the disappointments for me with the 2025 season is you had a lot of starting pitchers that you felt really good about, right? Chris Sale coming off a Cy Young, Spencer Schwellenbach, Reynaldo Lopez, the idea of getting Spencer Strider back, AJ Smith-Shawver in the rotation. I was intrigued at what Grant Holmes could do. And then guys got hurt. And you weren't really able to fill those rotation spots from the farm system. And that's always been a thing the Braves could do. The Braves always had pitching prospects. And the way it broke out this year was Atlanta just didn't. You just didn't have the options here, right? And AA talked to us a couple weeks ago about how it's hard to plan, to get quality depth. Quote, here's a quote. It's hard to amass depth because you're not going to likely sign established starters to be in Gwinnett. You're likely not going to sign or trade for established starters to be in the bullpen. So can you over-index and overbook a little bit? Sure. Maybe go into spring training with 6 and work your way through that. Maybe somebody's in the bullpen, but something's likely going to happen. And that's a thing that I've said a lot. Depth will always work itself out. You will, if you have one too many guys on opening day or in spring training, you will not have one too many guys all season. Something will happen to free up playing time. It always does. And if you go back and you look the last couple seasons, Atlanta has put a starter on the 60-day IL, at least one, every single season. 25, obviously, all 5 opening day guys were on there. But outside of that, 2024, Spencer Strider missed almost the entire year. 2023, Max Fried had a 90-day absence plus 2 other 15-day stints. Kyle Wright missed almost the entire season. Michael Soroka in 2022, he was supposed to be back already from the 2020 Achilles tear. He missed 147 days of the season. 2021, Soroka did miss the full season. Touki Toussaint missed 106 days. Huascar Ynoa missed 92 days. Tucker Davidson missed 133 days. I think a lot of us have kind of forgotten that the rotation was kind of a mash unit in 2021. The back end of it at least was. And so that's why Brian Snitker always wanted to get to spring training with 7 rotation options. Because through the course of Grapefruit League, one guy would go down or somebody would be ineffective or both of those things would happen and you would be set. Look at last year. AJ Smith-Shawver beat out Bryce Elder for the opening day spot and Bryce Elder went down. And it's just, that's kind of how it works here. And when you look at this, last year, all that stuff happened. The top 10 pitching prospects at the end of this season, you got exactly 2 of them in the majors, Waldrop and Didier Fuentes. And Waldrop pitched well, but not till the very end of the year. He got 10 appearances and they were all in the final 2 months of the season, right? Fuentes had a 13.85 ERA in 4 starts. You didn't see a lot of the guys that you were hoping to get to the majors, like Drew Hackenberg, really struggled. And so, AA's aware, we ended up having to go with minor league guys on minor league options who had struggled instead of prospects. That's why you saw the Eric Fetty. That's why you saw Carlos Carrasco and all that. And part of that was also the fact the Braves weren't in contention, right? But a lot of that also because these prospects weren't ready. And again, I have a quote from AA on this, talking about balance, getting, how you have to have your depth come out of the minors. Because again, you can't sign an established starter to be in Gwinnett. Quote, normally your depth has to be young and experienced guys that have options and or a minor league free agent that has fallen on hard times and is trying to rebuild his career or get himself going and so on. They are both fraught with risk. They're going to come with risk, right? The guy who's trying to rebuild himself, Davis Daniels is a great example of this. Ian Anderson's a great example of this. That's me, not AA. The guy who's trying to rebuild himself is obviously coming off a down year, signing a minor league deal. The young player is a young player. So you want them to be a Spencer Strider coming up and doing well. You want them to be Michael Soroka, Ian Anderson, Spencer Schwellenbach, and so on. But you can't guarantee they're going to come up and hit the ground running. And for as many guys as every year, there's some prospect that pops up and surprises us out of the farm system. Every year, there's also guys that really struggle and show they aren't ready. Didier Fuentes, Darius Vines, Alan Winans, Dylan Dodd the first time as a starter. There's guys who you think, oh yeah, they're going to be ready, they're going to be options, and then they're just not ready. So the trick is to have as many as possible. And I feel like this year, you could have plenty. And this is before we know what's going to happen with Hurst and Waldrop. Right? Because if you think about the fact that Ronaldo Lopez and Grant Holmes, Ronaldo Lopez should definitely be back to start 2026. Grant Holmes, we assume, if he's going to have the surgery on his UCL, he needs to have it in the next month or so. But he was attempting non-surgical rehab before having TJ. If he has TJ, he would miss all of 2026 and he'd be back for 2027. So you have a lot of options here, right? You could, let's say, Chris Sale, Spencer Strider, Spencer Schwellenbach, they're your 1 through 3. You could add a guy in the offseason, and then Ronaldo Lopez could be your 5th, with Grant Holmes in the bullpen and Hurst and Waldrop and Gwinnett. If you don't add anybody, Ronaldo Lopez can be number 4, Holmes and Waldrop can compete for the 5th spot. There's just lots of different options. Even if you assume that Hurst and Waldrop starts the year in Atlanta, right? Let's say Holmes is in the pen. Let's say you add a guy. Waldrop's your number 5. Lopez is your closer. Gwinnett's rotation could still be loaded, right? J.R. Ritchie will be back. Blake Burkhalter would be back. Didier Fuentes would be in that rotation as well. Lucas Braun was promoted late in the year to Gwinnett. He's probably in that rotation. As of right now, looking at who has team control and things like that, Davis Daniel and Ian Anderson are probably numbers 5 and 6. And together, there's your 6 guys that would give you minor league depth. And that's not even counting whatever happens with Bryce Elder. He doesn't have any options left. So you can't get him down to Gwinnett unless you pass him through waivers. And I guarantee you, somebody will claim Bryce Elder off of waivers. If you're not going to have him in Atlanta, you got to trade him, which they may trade him this offseason anyway. That's a different show. But I alluded to this earlier. Every year, somebody starts the season in the low minors and ends up debuting in the regular season, usually in the first half. Okay, 2022 is kind of the exception. Spencer Strider was in single A to start the year. He debuted in October, the very end of the year, right? I'm sorry, 2021. He debuted in 2021, late in the year there. You look at 2023, AJ Smith-Shawver started the season in high A, debuted in the majors in June. 2024, Spencer Schwellenbach started the season in high A, debuted in May. He stayed up the whole year. Didier Fuentes in 2025 started the season in high A, debuted in June. So you've got a couple guys in the majors that profile to potentially be that guy. But I also think that there absolutely is a prospect that's going to shock you, because every year there is a prospect that shocks you. And my choice this year is Luke Sinnard. 2024 third rounder out of Indiana. He had transferred to Indiana and was pitching in a regional in 2023 when he had that arm injury. Missed all of 24, was taken by Atlanta. Got back on the mound this year. Started off in single A Augusta, went single A to high A, and is now in the Arizona Fall League. So 16 starts, 72 and a third innings, 2.86 ERA this year. Struck out 86 in his 72 and a third innings with 27 walks and 3 total home runs. A whip of 1.175. And he's been really good in the Arizona Fall League so far, with the caveat it's been 2 starts and 5 total innings, 1.80 ERA, 1 run on 4 hits, no walks, 6 strikeouts. And the thing that's really impressive is kind of how he's doing it in the Arizona Fall League. Because he is a massive human being. 6'8", 250. He's a big boy with an eye. And he was throwing low to mid 90s, and it was like fastball, curveball, slider, changeup when he was drafted. Like, that's what he was doing in college. He is a different guy now. He's throwing all 3 fastball, like four-seamer, sinker, cutter. Fastball, so far in Arizona, because we have StatCast for all these Arizona games, he's averaged 95.5 with 17.5 inches of induced vertical break. Sinkers at 93.5, cutters at 89.5. And some of those pitches are like pretty good on a stuff plus small sample size. There's still a lot of fluctuation in here. But the sinker graded out at a 107 so far. The four-seamer's a 106. Remember, 100 is average. 99 is the cutter. So 3 pitches that are close there. And then he's got the slider. He's thrown the splitter a couple times. I'm sorry, instead of that changeup, he's thrown a splitter instead. So he's clearly like working on things in Arizona. He's almost entirely just on those 3 fastballs. And I'm willing to bet a lot of that is just they want him to get comfortable with the other fastballs. And this is also something Atlanta does when you look at the usage. He's throwing that slider, but he's not really throwing the curveball a ton. This is an Atlanta coaching point as well. They want guys to kind of temporarily shelve the curveball, overuse the slider so they can get it better quickly and they get comfortable with it. And then from there, turn around and bring the curveball back. And then again, they change the changeup to a splitter. Still an off-speed pitch, but a splitter versus a changeup. Usually you get some better movement, a better movement profile on that. I'm assuming he'll bring the curveball back. But either way, it's a much more impressive package. And when you look at the size of the guy, being a 6'8" guy like that, giving him a sinker and then being able to drop a splitter off of that is going to be very effective. Right? The taller a guy is, the better your stuff looks down in the zone. It's the opposite of Hayden Harris, where Hayden Harris has a very flat delivery and it looks really good at the top of the zone. His release point's so high, they're not even trying with that. Throw the sinker down in the zone. It looks like a really good pitch. And then something that I've noticed kind of going around baseball a little bit, and I've heard some whispers about it this winter, one of the strikeouts that he's gotten was on a slider at the top of the zone, which is not usually where you see breaking pitches thrown. But this is something I think you're going to see a lot more next year. With the ABS challenge system, if an umpire calls this incorrectly, you can challenge it and get the strike back. Elevated breaking balls are thrown more often in AAA, where they've had the ABS system, than in the majors, where they haven't. Because mentally, if you are a hitter, especially if a guy has a breaking ball that, like, think about some of the big curveballs you see, how they kind of pop up out of the hand a little bit when they're first released and then they end up dropping. When a guy or in this case, if you're really tall and you're throwing a breaking ball up in the zone, a lot of hitters are going to instinctively see that up out of the hand and just shut it down and not even try to swing. And you're going to be able to steal strikes. Again, I've talked to player development people, pitching nerd folks, and they're talking about the elevated breaking ball in 2026 is going to be a thing until hitters learn how to respond to it. So be mindful of that. It was the elevated fastball. Then it was the splitter. This year was the year of the pitch mix, where you're throwing 3 different fastballs and a bunch of different stuff. Next year is going to be the year of the elevated breaking ball. And Luke Sinnard's already been doing that a little bit in the desert. I gave you the list earlier. It feels like every year there's a guy who just shoots through the system and ends up pitching 40 or 60 innings in the majors. Give me Luke Sinnard. I think he's going to be that guy. He's going to be the breakout for us. But even if he's not, It just looks like Atlanta should have a lot more prospects able to contribute in 2026 on the mound as a starter than they had in 2025. This has been Braves Today for Tuesday, October 21st. Do me a favor. If you're listening on audio, leave a 5-star review, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, leave a comment down below. Even if it's just the word comment, it kind of pushes it to the algorithm, really helps us get Braves Today and out in front of new people. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.